right, so yeah, I'll just go get started. For everyone who had an AI talk on their bingo card for the con this year, you can go ahead and scratch that one off. I think it was probably inevitable that someone was going to get on stage and start talking about this, so I'll do my best to stay away from the buzzwords and the noise and the hype and the marketing around this and keep it a little bit more practical and actionable for you all. So yeah, I'll start with a quick intro about me. I'm Kento. The West Island is supposed to be Australia. I don't know if everyone was going to get that or not, but it's cool to be back home at the con this year here in New Zealand. I'm a bit of a security generalist at this point, I guess. I'm currently working in product security, but I've had a range of different technical security roles throughout my career so far. Onto the agenda then, I'm going to start with a bit of an intro section. I'll talk a little bit about AI and at least what I mean by that in the context of this talk. Then I'll talk a little bit about automation as well before I paint a bit of a picture as to the landscape of where those two technologies fit into security right now. And then I'll dive into sort of the meat of this talk, if you will. This is like an example showcase where I'll kind of talk about some problems within security that I wanted to build solutions for. I'll talk through like these tools that I've built out, these kind of proof of concepts, and how they use AI and automation to solve these specific issues that I had. And hopefully, like that'll give you some food for thought as to how you can approach some of the problems you might have in a similar way. Then I'll just address some of the issues with AI that we have at the moment, because that's really important to highlight before I kind of finish up with a bit of a mindset discussion, I guess, as to sort of the way I think we should be framing ourselves with AI and automation moving forward. Okay, so what even is AI then? This is obviously a booming industry within technology at the moment. I've got this graphic up here where it kind of talks about the different branches of AI, if you will. You've got robotics and computer vision and all these kind of things. I'm going to be focusing on this section in green. This is the natural language processing. That's the ability for the AI to sort of understand, interpret, and respond to human language, I guess. Within that, you've got your specific tools, your large language models or LLMs, and the generative pre-trained transformers, GPTs. These are basically interchangeable. They mean the same thing. These are your tools like your ChatGPTs, your Google Bards, Claude, Llama. There's that really kind of cringy Elon Musk one as well. I don't think anyone uses that. But you might have tried one of these technologies for yourself, generated a rap song or something like that. And that's what we're going to be focusing on for this one here. All right, automation has definitely been around, a lot longer than AI has. This goes right back to sort of the 18th century, steam engines, and all the sort of changes in manufacturing from there. We're currently in this software automation space, I guess. These are, you've got some larger SaaS products like your Xeros and your Workdays that kind of automate out business functions. And at a lower level, there's your Ansibles and your Terraforms and your Jenkins that automate parts of your development pipeline. Moving forward with automation, I guess there's robotics again there as well. These are those Boston Dynamics robots that can do backflips off platforms and things. And AI, machine learning, that's kind of been bubbling away for a little while there. In terms of the benefits or the reason why automation continues to be such a massive driving force, particularly within businesses, it just comes down to that cost reduction thing. I think ultimately, consistency and quality, there may be nicer reasons that'll be a little bit more palatable, but really it's just coming down to that sort of bottom line, like cost reduction equals profit increase. That's sort of where we're at, unfortunately. But where are we at with security then? Well, I think there's an increased complexity and volume of threats. So if you look at some of the APT crews and some of the ransomware crews and the level of sophistication and organization they operate at, even rando 15-year-olds are actually pretty elite at the moment as well. Couple that with other issues like skill shortages. There's an increased complexity in the IT systems we need to be securing as well, right? We all have to be cloud security experts now, and third-party supply chain stuff is also a big issue, and Auth and Federation kind of link everything together. So staying one step ahead of that is pretty challenging, and I think historically up till now, AI and automation have been kind of sold as like a bit of a magic bullet, if you will, like this, don't really need to worry about how it works, just buy this tool that uses AI and it'll solve all your problems, you'll never ever get hacked ever again. And you get these kind of buzzword phrases that I've got on the screen here, and in a lot of ways I think AI has sort of overpromised and underdelivered. I think that's fair to say. And the pushback from within the security community is to be a little bit cynical, and we can be cynical anyway, a bit jaded towards these terms and these phrases and these technologies. But if you start to look a little bit smaller scale and start to focus in really on some specific problems that you might have, or some specific rooms, like areas where you could be improving, then I think there's a bit of scope there for AI and automation to do some pretty cool stuff for you. So that's where these examples come in. So I've built these kind of proof of concepts, these little tools that they kind of Not really anything too crazy. They're not going to change your life either, but they do sort of address a specific problem that I had, so I'll talk about what the problems were. Then I'll sort of talk about what the tool does and how that tool uses AI and automation to sort of address that problem and come to a solution. All right, fishtext.ai then. Look, I'll apologize for the naming convention on these. I'm not the most creative person, so you'll just have to bear with me on those. But this is around those phishing text messages that we're constantly being spammed with, right? And so for everyone in the room, we can probably look at one of those text messages and within about a second be like, yeah, nah, that's phishing. But that's not necessarily true for everyone, and that's really important to keep in mind. So I wanted to take what I know of sort of URL analysis, phishing analysis, and couple that with some AI technology and build a tool that would quickly be able to tell you whether or not a text message you received is phishing or not. It works in kind of two steps. It has that first URL check component where I've got regex to sort of extract the URL from a text message, pass that through to known industry tools like VirusTotal, URL scan, and Open Threat Exchange. That gives you a bunch of indicators back on the URL you're looking at. And then I'll pass everything through along with the original text message and the URL through to ChatGPT and just basically say, hey, based on all this info, what do you reckon? In terms of the APIs then, an API is basically just a way for two programs to interact with each other. So I've got my program that I've built interacting with VirusTotal. If you've ever used VirusTotal, you can go on your browser, load it up, paste in a hash, paste in a URL, and then it will load a bunch of different scan engines and tell you which of those scan engines decided it was malicious or suspicious or harmless or benign or whatever, and you can get an idea. You can do that same thing just through the API. So in the top screenshot, I've got like just this program that's sending this URL and getting these indicators back. And in the bottom screenshot, I've got the same thing, but that's using regex first to sort of take the URL from a text message and send that through to VirusTotal. The tool itself then looks like this. Not the nicest interface, although this is probably what peak design kind of looks like anyway, really. You can just go ahead, paste your text message in there, click Analyze, that does its thing, and you get these responses back. So in the first example, I've highlighted areas where ChatGPT is calling out maybe spelling errors or grammatical errors that are maybe indicative of phishing. And in the second example here, I've highlighted where it's calling out, oh yeah, the VirusTotal output you gave me as well, 6 scanners classified that as malicious. You can kind of see it's able to sort of take the raw indicators and the raw data that you get from these known APIs and these known tools, as well as do a bit of analysis on the language within the text message itself. This is what that looks like just from a diagram point of view. It's really pretty simple. Just has that first URL check component. It's extracting the URL and sending that through to these known tools, and then you get this report information back before it all gets sent to ChatGPT. And if you're sitting there thinking, damn, this is kind of simple, like it's actually not that crazy, like it's because it is that simple. This is basically 100 lines of Python code and some really dodgy HTML. But take a little think about what's under the hood then when you start thinking about vendor products and how they're integrating AI and LLMs, especially in the short term, because like I could get on stage and be like, this is the future of phishing analysis. This is AI-driven phishing analysis, and like it's actually nothing too insane. Like it might not be ChatGPT that a vendor might be using, but like I'd say at least in the short term, it's probably not going to look too dissimilar to something like this. Okay, I move on to talking about threat intelligence now. So this one is built around those threat intel reports that get published online, and they're so information dense, and they're really detailed and comprehensive, and they're probably the most information-rich resources that would detail the types of threats you might experience as an organization, right? But taking those and sort of digesting them and understanding, okay, well, based on what I have within my own environment, like what should I actually be doing to make sure that I'm improving my security based on all of this info? So that's what this one's aimed to do. It starts by taking the threat report that you give it, getting the content back, and then based on the specifics of your environment, it's going to tell you those actionable items, right? Like, here are the threat hunting techniques specifically that you should start looking at doing to make sure you haven't been hit with this kind of activity already. Here are the specific detection rules that you can implement that will give you some alerting moving forward. And based on the technologies that you have, like here are the mitigations or controls that you can actually start putting in for prevention, so you're not actually going to get hit by this in the first instance. And then, of course, you can start aligning to things like MITRE ATT&CK based on what you've already got and based on where you're heading towards. So here's what this one looks like. No weird front end here, it's just a command line tool. It's really simple again, you just give it the URL of the threat report you're analyzing, and then you get this HTML report out of it. I guess HTML, so that technically is front-end stuff. Might be a little hard to see. It's kind of aspect ratios and all that here. But it gives you a summarization, and then you get this threat hunting techniques section. So that's calling out specific things you should start looking for, right? Like legitimate processes that are spawning child services and all that. Specific file names you should start hunting for, because if these file names are in your environment, then you might have some issues. And then it will start giving you the detection rules as well. So I've asked for Splunk here, so it gives you the rule name, talks about the purpose of the rule, and then it actually just starts building out the Splunk query that you can start implementing. Now, out of the box, just asking for give me detection rules in Splunk, it's probably not going to be able to copy and paste that directly into your environment, but you could take this one step further and start saying, give me a detection rule in Splunk, and my Splunk environment looks like this. I have these indexes, I have these source types. In those indexes, I have these fields. My data is normalized in this way. And the sort of more specific you go with it, the better the output is going to be. But even as is, this is a pretty good place to start with thinking about the kind of alerting you want to be implementing based off these threat intelligence reports. So here's what this one looks like then. It's even more simple than the previous one. Starts off with that first request, gets some text response back, and then it just passes all that through to ChatGPT. And you end up with this HTML report. So if you're a large enough organization, maybe sort of the threat hunting section could go to a threat-based team, maybe the detection rules could maybe be given to an engineering team, and then there might be a vulnerability management team that can start looking at some of those mitigations and controls. If you're a bit more of a one-man army, then you can think about, okay, where should I start prioritizing the work that I do and start moving from there. All right, the next one here, cyber rule format conversion tool. Yeah, I think I just gave up naming at this point. It pretty much is what it's called. This one's still based around detection rules, but specifically around the issue that every single vendor and platform and tool has its own language for doing detections. And oftentimes, during an incident or a security event, or even just in general, people will be sharing their detection logic online. And that's one of the awesome things about the security community is sort of that willingness of people to share their knowledge and their expertise. But when you're in this scenario where maybe Splunk and KQL might be the sort of most common ones, but often you'll never get a rule that's published online that's doing some really awesome, looking for some really awesome stuff that is usable for you, and you have to do this kind of manual translation process and sort of understand what the rule's doing and how you can build that yourself. And even if it is in the same language, it is a Splunk rule and you use Splunk, well, no two Splunk environments are really created equal. So there's still a lot of work you have to do there anyway. So I wanted to build this it's a tool that works kind of like Google Translate, where you can paste in a detection rule, select what you want to translate that to from a drop-down, and then you get the output on the other side. Here's what that looks like. So again, I said it works like Google Translate. I never said it looked like it. But you can see here, on the top, I've got a KQL Azure Sentinel rule, and that's looking for global admins, and then you get the Splunk version down below. Here's a slightly more complicated version. This one's looking for lateral movement within your network specifically. And at the bottom, it actually starts giving you a reverse engineer some of the logic within the original rule, and then it'll start talking about, okay, well, based on what the original rule is trying to do, here's what that might look like within Splunk as well. And again, you could go one step further and really get specific on what your Splunk environment looks like. But even as is, just the ability for it to start reverse engineering and explaining the sort of logic that you want to be implementing within your own rule, that's a pretty good starting point for thinking about how you can go about it for yourself. And even just here, you might change the source and you might change a few fields here and there, but it's a much easier way to do it than starting to think about it yourself, I would say. This is what that one looks like. This one is the most simple one by far. You can probably look at this and just be there's actually no difference from me using this tool that I've spent time building out compared to just going to ChatGPT, typing in the box, or pasting in the box a detection rule and saying, hey, translate this to Splunk. And that's actually absolutely true, but I think what this one illustrates is just how easy it can be to start thinking about doing this stuff from a more automated process. Take a process that you use, maybe repeatedly, maybe once every day or multiple times a day potentially, one where you know what the output is going to look like, so you know what a successful outcome is. That is a really great place to start. Start getting your feet wet with thinking about little automations. Start learning a little bit more about the tools you might be using, right? Looking under the hood, thinking about the APIs, in this case, ChatGPT, you start to learn a little bit about the different inputs and the users and the roles that it takes in and what it kind of gives you out based on that. And then use that as a building block. You've learned a little bit more now. Maybe you even here, you just kind of built in a tool that will like already have a bunch of the information that you need to be sending anyway, so it's already a little bit quicker. But from here, you can actually use that as a base to then start sort of iterating on that, maybe add more complexity, add more features, add more functionality, and go from there. Okay, the last one here is kind of based around security news then. I find it's pretty difficult keeping up with the news right now. Like, you have to listen to multiple hours of podcasts, and there's heaps of different news sources as well. So I had all these RSS feeds, and I was like, well, is there a way that I can kind of take these RSS feeds and really like personalize them, right? Like tailor them specifically to what I want to be learning about, maybe my industry or my technologies that I'm using or my location or just my interests. So this one's not actually built by me because it turns out someone else has kind of thought about this too. This one's actually built by a guy on GitHub named Yanan-C. So the tool's called RSS-GPT, although the RSS feeds that I've curated, they're available on my GitHub, so you could take my RSS feeds, I guess, use this person's tool, and then kind of start looking at it yourself. It runs through GitHub Actions, so it'll run like however often you want it to run, and it takes the RSS feeds that you feed it, and then it does this like granular filtering, I guess. Like it'll really like start taking the news items in those feeds and then publishing new feeds just directly within GitHub, static on GitHub pages. So now you have like this transformed group of feeds. Now you have all these other feeds, so you just put those into a RSS reader app, and you end up with this like one news feed where every item within there is sort of specific to what you want to be learning about. And that's a cool sort of way to come in the morning and just keep up to date with the news, but specific to what you need to be knowing about. All right, I'll move on to some of the issues with AI, I guess. I don't have enough time to talk about all of this. This is probably a 30-minute talk right here, but it is worth calling out. Like, there's a lot of reasons as to why you might not be looking at using AI, especially within your work environment right away. I think the data privacy kind of comes in there as like a big one to start with. Potential for bias is also pretty interesting. And then there's the quality assurance thing at the bottom. Like, how do we even know that the output we get from these AI technologies is correct and it's not just like making it up, essentially? I do think, though, that if you don't want to use AI, like maybe for one of these reasons, all of these reasons, or just because we don't like it in general, there's a lot of room for like taking some of the processes that you do, some of the problems that you have, and looking at them only from an automation space and making some great improvements from there. So to sort of illustrate that, I'll come back to this phishing one, and I'm going to remove the ChatGPT. I'm going to take the AI out of it. We'll call this like fishtext.noAI now. So to still do that same thing, it's going to extract the URL from a text message, or maybe an email in this case if you want, and then pass those through to these known tools, and then just put all of that into an HTML report. Now think about this from the perspective of a security analyst and how they might be doing phishing investigation and phishing responses just as part of their day-to-day job. Well, it might look like this to start with. There'll be an email come in to the phishing inbox that's reported by a member of staff. Then an analyst is going to see that email come through and be like, okay, I got to create a ticket in like a platform like ServiceNow, just to use an example. So they'll create a ticket, and then they would typically then start doing their investigation. They might open up 3 different browser tabs, one for each of these or more or whatever you use. Start filling out the captures, pasting in the URLs, taking screenshots of all the outputs, adding comments into their ticket, and then they'll be ready to sort of move on to some response actions. Well, having a tool like this that can just sort of perform all of those manual tasks automated in one single program, which gives you a report out of it, then they would just be able to like upload that report to their ticket and then just start moving from there. So we've already kind of improved on that typical analyst workflow, but you can still see there's like these 3 clear manual steps that are going on here where an analyst might have to do something. So we can just sort of like step through this a little bit more in terms of automation, I guess. If we know that the phishing inbox is going to be the trigger, if you will, for an incident being created, then we can just have that sort of create a ticket straight away. Just auth ServiceNow to the inbox, and an email comes in there, and that creates a ticket. Go one step further, auth the Python program through the Microsoft Graph API. So now an email will come into that inbox, create a ticket, and then kick off this workflow where it'll extract the URL through regex, generate like this HTML report from all these known tools. And then because we've got a ticket already, we can just upload the ticket straight to ServiceNow, and now an analyst can just jump onto the ServiceNow platform. A ticket's already been created, it's got a title, it's got the email content, it's got the URL, it's got all these indicators based on that already, and they can then move straight into response, which is obviously a more time-sensitive thing. The faster they're able to sort of start thinking about response actions, the better it's going to be for the organization. Now, if this is starting to get maybe a little bit too complicated, like we don't use ServiceNow, we don't really know how Graph API works and all that, I want to highlight again the importance of just starting really small on this. Like start small to start with, right? Take something that you know how it works and start thinking about maybe automating that to start with. Like take a URL, send that to VirusTotal and get the response back. You can use any programming language for this. You could use curl, you could use PowerShell. It's really well documented as well, and if it's not well documented, there'll be YouTube videos and tutorials. And that's a great way to sort of start. Maybe then you can do 2 things at a time, 3 things at a time. You get a lot of information back now, so you start putting that into a report. And then you kind of just build from there and just sort of like learn as you go. Like try something out, okay, that didn't really work, we'll try something else then, oh, that's working now. And then use that as a sort of base, and from there, thinking about it in this way, like starting small and going and going and going, you can end up with some pretty cool tools that are doing some pretty impressive workflows, giving you some pretty cool value in your environment or even within your daily life. Okay, that kind of brings me through to this future mindset section, I guess. I just sort of talked a little bit about that incremental innovation thing, right? Like starting small, iterating, building, learning as you go. I think in terms of the larger AI space, though, like how is AI going to impact security, and how should we feel about it, and what should we be thinking about? I think this concept of problem identification is going to be really important. This is like being able to clearly recognize and define the problems that need solving within your security environment. And then not just stopping there, not just stopping at figuring out what the problems are, thinking about it in terms of solutions as well. Like think in terms of solutions rather than just the technology. That'll really help set you apart. Like starting to identify, okay, where do we need improvements? Where are we going wrong here? And then what does the solution to that look like? And where should we end up as an outcome? And then maybe AI and automation can be the tools that will serve your clear goals, solve some specific issues, and get you to these like solution state. Because on its own, AI and automation are never going to be just the answer or just the solution. But they could be a way to get you to a solution if you're able to understand what your problems are in the first place. Like AI really at the moment is just a tool that is good at giving great answers. So if it's easy to give great answers, then the most important thing is your ability to ask the right questions. So ask those questions, start thinking about what the problems are, where the improvements could be, and then move towards the solutions from there. And I think that's pretty much where we're going to be heading. Collaboration as well, I think this will be increasingly important. Being able to sort of harness those diverse perspectives and backgrounds and experiences, especially if we're thinking about those solutions, like what does the best solution look like? Well, if we're trying to get to that state and think in that way, then having that collaboration and getting that collective expertise is going to be really beneficial rather than just sort of thinking about it for yourself or within your own team. Maybe going out to other security teams or other teams within technology or even outside of technology, You know, like HR and privacy and legal, like they all have a perspective on what the best solution should look like. So sort of gaining that experience and understanding from there, that'll sort of help get you to the solutions, and then you can move from there. Continuous learning as well. This is really important in security anyway, but will probably be increasingly more so as this kind of thing becomes more and more prevalent. There are other industries that are maybe further along in the AI and automation adoption, so there's some learnings we can have from there. But even just like going outside of the security bubble and learning a little bit more about AI technologies or maybe some automation and picking up some scripting skills and that kind of thing, that'll help sort of expand your breadth of knowledge and your understanding and your skill set. And if it comes back to that problem identification and solution thinking, having a wider skill set and a wider understanding and having that breadth will really be one of your strengths, I guess, in being able to figure out what the best solutions look like and then moving from there and making those improvements. All right, that's everything I had to talk about for this one. I've got my GitHub up there, like all the tools and proof of concepts and stuff that I talked about are available there if you want to check those out. You can come get in touch with me as well. On Discord is probably where I'm most hanging out. LinkedIn works too. And I've got a blog there as well where I kind of ramble about some of this stuff in long text form, so you're welcome to check that out as well. But otherwise, yeah, thanks.
Busted!